Hello, everybody. It's the Lawn Gnome, and welcome to your July 2019 episode of Sunday Sit Down, the show where anything goes and nothing gets left behind. As always, I am Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and I don't know why it feels like I haven't done one of these in such a long time. Maybe it's just because of the fact that I'm just so busy with so many other things outside of YouTube. And every single time it's time to make a brand new Sunday Sit Down, I'm just really excited because of the conversation that I am going to have. And I'm really excited for today's conversation because it's about something that we really don't see much in YouTube as a whole. I mean, when you take a look at the various communities, there's a massive booktube community. There's a huge film critics community. The beauty, the health, forget it. It's everywhere. The pets, that's what you see predominantly. But there are very few people out there that really discuss the topic of music. And it's a shame because music is a topic that is so ever-changing, especially in the last 20 years with the trends and the technology. And I really feel that this could be a small stepping stone to hopefully a discussion that will continue on by other means. And I also like to try and bring as much music as I can to my YouTube channel to talk about what's new, what's exciting, and etc. And I've got an excellent guest with me. She is a fellow member of the Friday Five, which is a small group that does a Top 5 Wednesday, so to speak, type of thing revolving around topics in music. And she also does a little bit of booktubing as well. And I'm really excited to discuss music with this young lady because she is very much as passionate about music as I am. And that is Brooke from Asreadbybrooke. Brooke, good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining me on my show today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here because there are a bunch of people through the Friday Five that do have really great taste in music, but I definitely appreciate the fact that when I watch your Friday Five videos, you and I seem to have extremely similar tastes. So to truly have an excellent conversation about music, I wanted to bring someone who does have those similar tastes because I think a lot of what's happening in music today affects those specific likes and dislikes that the two of us most likely share. So I really think that that would be a good thing to start with. So as always, we have 7 questions and we always begin at the beginning. And my first question to you with a series of 7 is, when in your life did music become more than just listening to songs and more about appreciating the art that music is? And after that piece, the second part of this question is, which was the artist or band that triggered this liking towards music as more than just songs in you?
In my life, it was probably in middle school, which is just a big transformative time for everyone.
I agree.
No matter who you are, it's always just a big transition time. And I started listening to a lot of the grunge music, but specifically I really got into Nirvana, and that was probably the band that made me start appreciating more of the art and everything that went into the music more than just listening to the music itself. I was like obsessed. I mean, I still am, but like it was really bad. And it was when I really got into a lot of like the other communities around music other than just listening to the music. And Nirvana really triggered a lot of that for me.
I would definitely say that Nirvana, and especially that couple of years, whenever I talk about music, whether it's with someone that I know or even my wife, I always say that 1991 to 1997, I'll even go as far as 1998 even, I think that those were probably the greatest years that music ever had to offer. I mean, don't get me wrong. The 60s were amazing. The 70s had their highs and lows. I also think that as I've gotten older, the 80s, everything about the 80s, whether it's movies or music or fashion, there's just something truly special about the 80s and all those new wave one-hit wonders. I don't know what it is, But the 90s in the early portion, that was a time when certain artists decided that we needed to go back to basics.
Mm-hmm.
And we needed to try and give people a song that meant something again, as well as us giving us a sound that was not necessarily new, but something different that was around for so many years, and just giving it a fresh face for a whole new generation. And it was just something that I never would have imagined, especially looking back on that, because the time that you're talking about is when I was coming of age. So I was listening to these bands. And it's amazing how so many people who, whether they grew up on it or if they actually liked it, finding them later, people are now yearning for those types of sounds again. And I don't know why it's just not clicking with the music industry in general. I mean, for me, I was given my first hearing of the Beatles when I was 5 years old. And I loved the Beatles so much. My mother was a big Beatles fan. My dad was not as vocal about the Beatles as my mom was, but he was also a fan as well. When it came to bands that he liked, he talked about the Beach Boys, Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles, Chicago, great bands. But my mother was the Beatles fan between the two of them. So I loved them. And I always liked listening to the music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That was basically what I grew up on. But when I got into middle school, that was when I actually got onto the modern trends, and I started hearing Nirvana, Green Day, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins. That was my music. And that was when I started to find my own niche. But I think I've discovered music as more as an art form a little bit later, probably in my early college years. And that was when I discovered a band called Dream Theater, which was one of the most unreal, talented bands I ever heard in my life. It literally was a symphony of rock and roll. I never heard music like that before in my life. And that was when I really started to go and discover other things. I'll tell you a funny story. I also started looking into the areas of metal and hard rock because I thought I would never go into that stuff. And in 1997, 98, that was when I actually first heard the Backstreet Boys. And I swear to God, I really thought that they were a black R&B band. That's what they sounded like to me when I first heard them. But then when I discovered the music videos and saw what 1999 was giving us and the resurgence of everything that I thought died with New Kids on the Block, I said to myself, I need to find new avenues. And I'll go a little further into that, but that was the beginnings of music for me and finding it as more than just songs.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Dream Theater definitely brings a whole lot of stuff to the table that just you don't really consider.
I know. It's just, have you ever seen them in concert?
I have not.
I've seen them twice.
Wow. I bet that's just amazing.
Their shows are just entrancing. People don't even mosh. They just sit in their chairs and they listen. That's what they do. It's like, because it's like, all their songs are diverse and different, and people always wonder at the concert, what is the song that they are going to play next? Everyone is just so eager for the next song. So that's what makes them such a special group. And the fact that I saw them twice, man, yeah. Megadeth was the reason why I saw them for the first time. Because I went to the very first Gigantor in Jones Beach, New York. So when I heard that Dream Theater was going to be the second act, I was like, I got to go to this concert. So let's go into the second question. And that is, was there a specific genre type that you tried to avoid for so long? And did it finally suck you in? And which was the artist or the band that did that?
I think something I tried to avoid for a really long time is a lot of the new, like, emo music. Bands like Pierce the Veil, Sleepy with Sirens, Black Veil Brides, all of the newer, like, pop punk and stuff like that. I really tried to avoid that for a long time because I was one of those like kids in like middle school where if it was like super popular, I didn't want a part of it. And that's when it was really big, like Panic at the Disco and all that stuff. And I really tried to I was trying to be that like elitist kind of person, and I tried to push that stuff away, but then actually sat and listened to Black Veil Brides one time, and that just changed everything. I actually sat and listened to them, and they're amazing. And I've had the opportunity to see them like 4 times in concert, and they're just an amazing live performance group, and their music is amazing, and they have a really great message, and they really changed my life in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's one group and one genre that I really tried to push myself away from, but I ended up being sucked in, and I'm still emo, as they say.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned emo. I had a conversation with my wife about that, and I said that I think that emo was the last ditch effort, especially in the mainstream music that we have today, and we'll go into this a little bit further on. I think that was the last trend that tried to keep rock and roll relevant in the mainstream. At least that's what I think. I mean, I have listened to Panic at the Disco. I'm not a fan, but I respect Brandon Urie and everything that he does. And I am glad to actually see that there are still some artists that are trying to give us mainstream rock sounds. I mean, I appreciate artists like Ed Sheeran. He's a brilliant singer-songwriter. He plays his music very well, but he's not, to me, he's not rock, you know? And even one of my favorite bands from the last decade, which is Coldplay, they're very talented, but I would probably classify them as rock, but not like what you and I mean, look, you're the one wearing the Metallica shirt, so you know rock.
Yeah.
So that to me is more of an alternative sound, and they're great. Don't get me wrong. I think that bands like Coldplay are great, and there are also some new artists out there that I really like that are really trying to capture the new wave 80s sound, which I think is great, because like bands such as Churches, who I've recently discovered that I really enjoy. Also, this new band that I discovered that had their first album in 2018 called The Night Game. They're very good. I also like the new singer-songwriter Alice Merton. She has a really good voice and excellent lyrics in her sound. And I mean, one of the biggest acts in this sound is also the 1975, and I like the 1975. I think that they're very inspirational, innovational, and I like that about them. But I just don't think that these sounds are really catching on as much as everything that is now officially auto-tuned. But
they're bands that I would like that are like rock, but like you don't really think of them as like the traditional rock. There's some kind of like disconnect there.
I agree. Yeah, for me, at the beginning, when I was starting to come into my own and figure out what my sound was, I never wanted to try and get into heavy metal because, I don't know, for some strange reason, I thought that that was going to be something that was going to get me in trouble just because of the people that I was around, the community that I lived in. But as I said earlier, when Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, 98 Degrees, when they started becoming the big sounds, I was starting to really not just look for sounds that were hard. Like, that was when I was discovering Blink-182, Korn, Linkin Park, Disturbed, Limp Bizkit, all these bands, the new metal sound. And they were great. But I was also finally starting to listen to Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth, and one of my favorite bands of all time now is Iron Maiden. I adore Iron Maiden. I saw them in concert too. What a show.
Wow.
What a show.
I'm jealous.
Oh God, Bruce Dickinson just tears the house down in so many ways. It's unbelievable. And I just appreciate their energy. Steve Harris is just one of the best bassists that I've ever seen live. And his songwriting is absolutely incredible. I mean, I also like that even though he does most of the singer-songwriting, the rest of the band does contribute. Adrian Smith has contributed, and Bruce Dickinson has contributed, Nico McBrain has contributed, everybody. I love that about them. I like it when they get the whole band involved. I mean, that's what the Beatles used to do. So And I also started to listen to a lot more classic rock. I listened to more bands like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and I listened to a lot of Jimi Hendrix, Ramones, Black Sabbath, so The Who, Queen, all these great bands, you know, like
The
so that
forefathers of rock.
yeah, so I wanted to just get away from this pop, and
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even into any of the hip hop stuff. I mean, my brother actually listened to it, and yeah, it's fun to listen to, but it's just not my cup of tea. I'll listen, don't get me wrong, I'll listen to Run DMC or Public Enemy any day of the week. I will, but even NWA. But then the other sound that I never thought that I would want to listen to, ironically, was the trance slash house, and I am now the biggest Daft Punk fan.
Really?
Yeah, it's just like I just thought. I think what really turned me into a Daft Punk fan was in 2001. I first heard their song "One More Time." It was just a feel-good summer celebration song, and I loved that their music video was anime. I liked that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I heard their soundtrack for Tron Legacy, I fell in love with them because I loved the fact that they actually composed a soundtrack for a film. And it was really wonderful because it was a beautiful blend of techno and classical. It was beautiful. And that was when I started to discover them more. And I really see that they're not just trying to do sounds on a loop like they used to do in their early days. They're really trying to take blends of various different sounds and really turn them into something great. And I also appreciate it when a artist that plays popular music does do something like a film soundtrack. I mean, right now, my favorite film composer is Trent Reznor.
He's very, very talented. I'm not personally a huge fan of Nine Inch Nails, but you can't deny the man's talent.
Yeah, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have provided some of the most amazing film soundtracks, and it is so awesome to know that Trent Reznor is the first hard rock artist to have an Oscar. That's just crazy because he won it for The Social Network. That was so awesome to see.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing to see people that are so talented within the community that's usually pushed to the side and not shown on air, you know, like with stuff like the Grammys, and getting to see these people get their credit that they're due for all the talent that they have that is usually just not acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's really starting to change the way that he does compose his work. The last film that he composed with Atticus Ross was Jonah Hill's indie film Mid-90s. And it really sounds very different than anything that he has composed, because I classify every film soundtrack that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross composed, I call it the new Nine Inch Nails album. Because to me it is, because Atticus Ross now works with him on his Nine Inch Nails projects.
Okay, well, awesome.
Yeah. So I love the Social Network soundtrack. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo soundtrack is amazing. The Gone Girl soundtrack is so hauntingly beautiful. And unfortunately, the Patriots Day soundtrack is not available on CD because I'm an old school guy. I like to get my physical stuff, but that's another topic for later on in the show here. So the third question that I have for you is, the crucial point in the world of music was Napster, thus phasing out almost all physical media in music. How do you feel about that?
I feel like even though we have a lot of like the phasing out of different kinds of physical forms of music, like CDs, or feel like they're like slowly like dying off or what have you, but you have a like resurgence of vinyl. And that's something that I'm personally, whenever I buy an artist's new album, I buy it on vinyl. And of course I have like the Spotify and whatever, but there's just something about having a physical form of the music that I don't think will ever really die. I think we're just going to have some shifting in what's popular, but I feel like the physical form of being able to own it and have it in your hands and look at the album artwork and all of the stuff that goes into it is just something that I don't think it's ever really going to actually die. I think it's going to have its up and its downs, like with the whole Napster scenario, but I feel like it's going to stick around.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's very interesting is all of the innovative ways that artists right now are trying to, I guess you could say, save the concept of the actual album.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Napster first came out, I used it not for the sake of just downloading all the songs that I liked. I actually liked to use it as a sampler, if you will. Like if
Mm-hmm.
there was a new album coming out from an artist that I liked or a new artist that a lot of people were talking about, I wanted to hear it first before I actually
That's
bought it
fair.
because the last thing that I wanted was because I know that there was a point in time where I literally sold half of my CD collection just because of the fact that I grew out of the sound and I just didn't want to listen to the music anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I just basically said, there's no reason for me to hold on to these if someone else can appreciate these more than I do.
Yeah.
But I like to see what was out there. If there was a new single from an artist that I knew that I wasn't going to buy their album from, I just download the song. It was also a great way for me to find like film scores and theme songs from TV
Mhm.
shows and songs that you hear at sporting events. So that was what Napster was for me. Because in the days that we're in right now with streaming, I I I have the capabilities, but at the end of the day, I just don't like it. You know? I heard this on a video that I saw on YouTube a few weeks ago. Something like Netflix and streaming, you're renting it. You're not
Yeah.
owning it. Because if you think about it, we're both Stranger Things fans. We just talked about that earlier. So you have a Netflix subscription and you're basically paying 150 something dollars a year so you can watch Stranger Things. But you can go to Target and you can buy the Blu-ray for 20 bucks and you don't have to spend any more money on that DVD or Blu-ray, and you can watch it as many times as you want, as long as you have a functioning Blu-ray slash upgradable DVD player, you know?
Mhm.
And you're absolutely right. It's one of the few things that I love about the physical albums is the artwork.
Mhm.
I love the creativeness and I love, I mean, all the famous album covers, like Iron Maiden's album covers are some of the greatest.
Yeah.
Metallica's are legendary. Nirvana's are iconic. The Beatles are forget about it, you know? One of the bands that I listen to in the world of hard rock and heavy metal is a band called Iced Earth, and I adore the album artwork that they have on their
Mhm.
albums. And I love the little booklets. I like the lyrics. I like the artwork inside the booklets. And this whole thing about digital downloads, I just say, you know something? That's cool if you're trying to be a Marie Kondo follower, but there's just something about having it in your hands. And let's look about books. Like, who doesn't love that new book smell?
Oh, I love it. Like you could just bottle that up. That'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they should. You know something? Maybe they should actually do that at like Bath and Body Works. You know, new book smell aromatherapy candle. You know how many people would buy those?
Like that and like new car smell, they would be in business forever.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I also hate the fact that cars are being manufactured now without CD players.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't like that at all. I mean, the laptop computer that I'm using right now, it has no DVD player.
Yeah, mine does not either.
So I actually bought myself an external drive. So I literally plug in my DVD player so I can watch DVDs on my computer.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I like physical. Collecting is a socially healthy thing for an individual because it's an extension of your personality.
Mhm.
And if you are a fan of anything and you get such a good feeling when you showcase your collection to your
Oh
friends,
yeah.
your peers. So,
Yeah, and something else about streaming is like if you don't buy the physical copies, artists make like nothing from streaming services. And so that's why I always feel like, while I like the convenience of like Spotify and making my playlists and all that stuff, I love Spotify. Hands down, I love it. But I feel like in the age where they're not making any money, I mean, really, they're like, there were some really huge artists that released like how much money they make from their streaming, and it was so low. It was not anything that you could just sustain yourself on, especially for like smaller bands. You have to buy the physical and invest in these bands in a physical form in order to help them survive.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel, because I want to give you two specific scenarios of two artists that have actually been around for a while, and I'm sure you know them, and you know them both for certain. Blink 182 and Owl City. Adam Young from Owl City is totally on the digital train. His newest album that came out last year, which was a wonderful album. I like Owl City. I find him to be like Dr. Seuss in music form because I like his rhyming techniques. I think it's great. But his last album was only downloadable. Like,
Oh,
there was no physical copy unless you went onto the Owl City website to buy the vinyl. There's no CD version, and I'm so angry about that because I like his music. I want to support Owl City. I have all the other studio albums that he's made, and the fact that I can't get this new album physically just really angers me. It really does.
yeah. I feel like a physical is something you're always going to have as an artist, especially bigger artists.
Hmm. And Blink 182 has a new album coming out literally in the next couple of weeks. So what they want is, before they actually release the album, is they are posting every individual song on social media for their fans to listen to, because what they want is they want everybody to hear the full album so that when people buy the album, certain songs don't get lost in the shuffle.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because you know the famous saying, like how all the popular songs out there from certain artists, but everybody says you have to listen to this song that's not on the radio and it's their best one. Like, a perfect example is one of my favorite bands growing up, Third Eye Blind. When their first album came out, everybody knew Semi-Charmed Life.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knew Graduate. Everybody knew How's It Gonna Be. Everybody knew Jumper. But everybody who bought that self-titled first album said, you have to listen to track 13. It's called Motorcycle Drive-By. It's the best song on the whole goddamn album.
That's the way it goes. And that's one of the things about streaming, and like I'm guilty of it myself, is like, if you're not like basically forced to listen to the thing the whole way through, and you can just pick the songs that you know or that you hear people or like talk about, like make popular, then you're going to miss out on some of the best songs that they have.
Exactly. When did you get, this is not even one of the questions, but I just want to ask it just because it's part of the conversation. When did you get your first iPod?
Oh, goodness. I was probably 11 or 12 when I got my first iPod. I was maybe in I was probably in like 5th grade when I got my first one.
You see, I like the iPod for certain things. I still have an old iPod. This is my old iPod.
Oh, that's the one I had. Yep.
The little nano thing, or shuffle or something like that. So I still have it, and I bring it on the train because I just like the fact that I have it, and it's easy to just have all my music that I just want to listen to for a short interval of time. But at the same time, when I'm in my car, I don't want to bring my iPod. I want to bring my CDs. I want to listen to my CDs. That's what I want to do. But I appreciate the convenience, and it's also a great way for all those songs that are not in my CD collection. They're all in my iPod, so I can just listen to all of them that way, etc. and all that stuff. Yeah.
And there's also something to be said about the physical form, especially when it comes to like smaller bands. Like I listen to a lot of local bands, and there's an older band from the Virginia Beach area. They're called Sea of Souls, and they have amazing like hard rock music, but they're not on you. There's like maybe 3 songs on YouTube. They're not on iTunes, not on Spotify or Apple Music or any of that. So unless you have a physical CD, you're not going to get to experience the greatness that is them. So it's like you have to have the physical copy. So there's something to be said for that.
Right, I agree. So the next question that I want to ask you is probably one of the more interesting ones. One of the staples of music that had been around for so many decades was terrestrial radio. But with satellite radio now, this specific kind of classic radio is not as diverse as it used to be. So when it comes to finding stuff from some of your favorite artists in terms of their new material, or even new artists that you want to get to hear, because one of the few things that makes me so specifically angry right now is like, I will find out that one of the bands that I like to listen to is coming out with a new album, but I never heard a single song. No one was giving me any news about it. And you're literally walking into this stuff blind unless you like download it or you sample it on Amazon. So how do you feel about the fact that this massive change has happened in radio?
I still listen to the terrestrial radio, but I agree, it's like it's not as diverse. Like you hear the same song so many times. They don't talk about the new bands, this band's new release, or they only play the same bands. So I think social media has a big part of like bridging that gap with finding out about new bands or finding out about new stuff about your favorite artists, because I follow all of my favorite artists on their different social medias, their Twitters, their Instagrams, or what have you. And so I see all of the announcements and all the other stuff like that. And then there's also different apps, like, I don't know if you've heard of like Bands in Town, which is you get, you download it, you follow the artist, you can connect it with your Facebook or your Spotify or whatever. You follow the artist you like, and the bands send you messages about stuff that's happening.
Oh.
So it'll be like they'll send a message if like their music video drops, or they're going to have a new album, or they announce a tour. So that's a really good way to keep up with them without the terrestrial radio way of doing things. But I do kind of miss I noticed a difference in the radio now and then what I remember listening to. I mean, not even like 15 years ago when I was a kid listening to the radio. There's just a dissonance there. And I don't know, but I think social media is a big part of how I find new bands that I listen to, and the way I think a lot of other people do it as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I personally had a very sad moment at the end of May because one of the most popular terrestrial modern rock radio stations, 95.5 WPLJ, officially ended their run, and they were around for almost 50 years. And they were known for one of the more popular morning shows and some of the best concerts in New York. And now they're owned by a Christian radio station. And it's so strange because I remember, especially when I was in high school, even in college, I had a radio station for hard rock and alternative in 92.3 K Rock. I had a pop station in Z100. There was the classic rock station, 104.3. There was a soft rock station, 106.7. There was an oldie station, 101.1. So there were so many different stations that were playing so many different kinds of music. So I had a good blend if I just wasn't in the mood to listen to any of my actual music that I owned and just wanted to just listen to the radio on its own, and also, you know, listen to the shows. That's another reason why people like terrestrial radio. People do like the shows that are there because they talk about the pop culture, they talk about what's in the news, and they make fun of it, of course, which is even more exciting. But and one of the other things that I also get a little bit upset about, especially with the local station near me, which is 101.1 WCBS, they are known as one of the greatest oldies stations in all of New York. They've been around for many, many years, and that was where my parents were able to listen to the songs from their generation. They listened to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, but now even that station has pushed away everything from the 1950s to the 1970s. So now oldies are 80s and 90s, which is kind of scary for me. I will admit that. And it's weird when you listen to a classic rock station and you hear Come As You Are, or you hear Give It Away, or you hear Basket Case. Like, you hear these songs that I remember when they were new. It's so weird to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think that it's really sad that these decades, which were literally the birth of all of this music that we listen to now, we need to let people know that it's relevant still, you know? Like, I don't appreciate the fact that you have to buy satellite radio if you want to hear specific music that you like. And quite frankly, I'm still not on board on channels that are just dedicated to one artist.
I personally don't have satellite radio, but my parents do. So if I end up driving their cars, that I do appreciate some of it to where I can listen to some of my more like niche things, or like if I'm not in a certain mood, I can go and listen to like Sirius XM. Like I could go listen to like liquid metal. If I'm feeling some 90s, I can go listen to Lithium. So I appreciate that to an extent, but it also kind of puts you in a box of what you listen to.
Exactly.
And doesn't allow for a whole lot of exploration, which I feel like is what radio did for a lot of things.
Exactly. It was not, like you said, it's not boxing you in. If you're listening to Lithium, and don't get me wrong, Lithium is an excellent station. My wife has satellite radio in her car, so that's what we listen to. But she also likes it because she gets to hear show tunes. You don't hear show tunes on the radio. I won't deny the fact that show tunes are something that you just cannot find on your radio dial. But I mean, I like classic vinyl, I like classic rewind, and I like the fact that she has a 40s and 50s and 60s station, but it's also great to have it all together as a blend. You know, that's one of the few reasons why I like channels like WCBS 101.1 and 95.5 and Q104.3, because they were able to give you that nice little blend of decades. That's what I liked about that. When you have that blend, I feel that the experience is just much more pleasant, especially as a music fan, because even when I was listening to Z100 in the 90s and grunge was the popular stuff, yes, overplaying was something that always got my goat. I hated that because I wish that I didn't hate Iris from the Goo Goo Dolls. That station, those stations played that song so much, I cannot listen to it anymore.
That's fair.
Especially because the Goo Goo Dolls are a great group.
Oh, they are. They are very talented. Yeah, but while there are a lot of the radio stations like that are going away, there is something to be said for ones that are still maintaining that, because there is a station near me, it's FM 99 WNOR, and they play, if you're listening to it, you'll hear some old Alice in Chains, you'll hear some Metallica, and then you'll hear some new stuff like Bad Flower or something like that that's brand new. And so you have a good mix, and they're right there after each other. So I feel like there's something to be said for some of the ones that are kind of still maintaining that in today's age.
And I agree with you. And I also think that some of these stations, that especially some of the stations that play like the older music, like the classic rock, they should also be willing to play the new single from the Rolling Stones or the new single from the Who. Like, when classic rock artists bring new music, it's just as relevant as their classic stuff, you know? I mean, I love the fact that there are certain bands that have managed to stay around and give us music throughout the decades, and it's great to actually see how these bands evolve and change, specifically bands like Aerosmith. It's really cool to listen to some of their songs from the 1970s and then listen to their songs from the 1990s and then even go into the 2000s and 2010s, or even bands that are much younger, like Blink-182 has been around for almost 3 decades now, even going on their fourth. I mean, it's crazy to believe that bands like Green Day are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's like, when you listen to Blink-182's first album and you hear one of their more recent albums like Neighborhoods, which I think is their greatest album. I love Neighborhoods. It's just really interesting to see these bands evolve with their lyrics and their sounds and their musicianship.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's
definitely
one of the best things.
I mean, did you hear the newest album from Collective Soul that came out this year?
Oh, I have not listened to it yet, but I'll definitely.
The songs are very good.
I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, I really do. I really do like their new music. It's not bad at all. So let's go into the 5th question, and this is going to be a fun one. Some of the greatest bands in all of music are now either retiring or, unfortunately, they're passing on. And in the last 5 years, music biopics are suddenly popping up so much more often than they used to be. Do you feel that that is a good way to preserve their legacy, or do you think that there should be other ways to do so?
I think there should be like a good mix of the two, because I mean, I love a good music biopic. Like it's great. Like I love Bohemian Rhapsody. It was a great movie, but there should be other ways to preserve it as well, because that showed those movies are made. They're movies. They're cinematic. They're going to change things or alter things to fit a cinematic narrative. So there needs to be ways to preserve it in a way that are more authentic and make sure you don't lose some of the energy that the band originally or the artist originally had that might get lost. I'm not saying it is, but that might get lost in a cinematic way.
I agree. And the other problem in regards to the music biopic is not every artist is going to, shall I say, be biopic worthy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, I thought that Bohemian Rhapsody was a great film. And I think that one of the most unsung great music biopics was from a couple years back, and that was Love and Mercy, about Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. It's a fantastic film, and it's so cool because it was a story that was told in 2 points in Brian Wilson's life. There was the point where it was in the mid-60s and he was writing Pet Sounds, and then there was the point in the 80s when he was going through a very serious dark time, and he was played by 2 different actors. The younger version was played by Paul Dano brilliantly, but the performance that shocked the hell out of me was the older Brian Wilson, who was played by John Cusack.
Ooh, I love John Cusack.
Yeah, you've got to see Love and Mercy. You will be blown away by his performance in this movie. And Elizabeth Banks is in it, and Paul Giamatti is in it. It's a fantastic movie, and if you're a Beach Boys appreciator, you will really like it. And I also really liked Rocket Man. I thought it was so creative and different. I think that it would be great to see back-to-back Best Actor Oscar wins, because Taron Egerton, I really thought at points in time in that movie that he was Sir Elton John, and it was scary.
Really? Awesome.
But
I felt that way about oh gosh, I can't remember his name, that played Bride May in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes, I think his name is Aidan Gillen.
So it's
something, or no, that's a different person. I think it was Gilliam Lee.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you know that Roger Deakins was not Roger Deakins, John Deacon. I keep mixing up him and Roger Taylor. John Deacon was played by Timmy from the original Jurassic Park. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know that.
That was Joseph. That was Joseph Mazzello playing him. That was and he was my favorite part of the whole movie.
Oh yeah, it was a great movie. And have you seen The Dirt?
I was not a fan. I wish that was a full-length film in theaters, because I feel that they just needed to put more production into it.
I feel like I was a little iffy about the casting at first, but then I actually watched the movie and I felt like they did a good job with the casting, especially with Machine Gun Kelly as Tommy Lee, which I was a little apprehensive about at first, but I don't know. I personally liked the movie because I felt like it didn't shy away from the really bad parts of their
I
um
liked Ramsey Bolton as Mick Mars. He was good.
oh my gosh, he was the best.
He was
That
good.
like there's a couple of times in the past couple of weeks where I've gone and like just thought about some of the snarky stuff that they put in that movie through his character that I just had to go look up on YouTube and watch because it was just great. But that's one of the things I feel like that some of the biopics might miss is like they put all the good parts in and maybe shy away from some of the more bad parts. That's one thing I really liked about Bohemian Rhapsody is like they didn't paint Freddie Mercury as this perfect person. They showed him as a real person. And I feel like that's something that needs to be maintained if we keep going in this direction.
Yeah, I think my issue with The Dirt was the fact that it was a Netflix film, because if you want an amazing story, especially considering the fact that this was the first time that it was a biopic about a hard rock / heavy metal band, you know, I watched the Motley Crue Behind the Music. So
I love Behind the Music.
I love, and you want to know something? That was where I'm going with that is, I think that Behind the Music needs to be brought back.
Oh yeah.
They don't need to necessarily have the artists, but even bands who are long gone, they should still make a series, because every single one of these bands was such a big contributor to music. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just rock. I mean, I would love a Behind the Music of the Supremes. I would love a Behind the Music of Elvis Presley, you know?
There's something to be said for documentaries. I just feel like I think personally I would go more for a documentary as opposed to a biopic, just because I feel like it's more raw and more real. Like I love watching, I don't know if you've seen Metallica's Some Kind of Monster.
I've seen a little bit of it.
I love that documentary, and I love all of the behind the music. I used to watch back then it was what was it? Like MTV Classic or something, VH1 Classic or something like that.
VH1 Classic.
VH1 Classic. It's something else now, but they used to play a lot of the old behind the musics and stuff, and that was like we were talking about earlier, like learning more about the art behind the music, and that was a big part of that for me because I used to watch all of those behind the musics, like with Metallica and the Motley Crue and all of those.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other issue is the fact that certain artists are just not worthy of a biopic. Because, like, I showed you this earlier before we went on the air, but, like, I'm a big Rush fan. What story can possibly be told about them in the movies? You can't really tell their story. You can listen to their music because their music is unreal. But I don't think that you'll get a great biopic from them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the other things I liked about The Dirt. I liked that they had an actor play David Lee Roth. I liked the fact that there was an actor that played Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy has to become a biopic. I think that he would make an amazing biopic.
Or you would have to have multiple movies for all of the stuff that man has done.
I mean, like, I personally feel that Kiss is worthy of a biopic because they revolutionized the whole music industry in terms of the rock spectacle. I feel somewhere down the line we should get a Madonna biopic. I mean, the hardest one that will ever be tried is probably the Beatles, although the 1993 film Backbeat is very good. If you haven't heard of that movie, I really yeah. It was about the Beatles before they actually became famous. So this was actually the Beatles pre-Ringo.
Oh, wow.
So they had Stephen Dorff from the original Blade film. He played the original bassist Stuart Sutcliffe, and Ian Hart, who played Professor Quirrell in the first Harry Potter film, was John Lennon.
Oh, wow.
Two more that I want to mention is I really think that we should get a Kurt Cobain biopic.
Oh, yeah.
And we definitely should get a David Bowie biopic.
Oh, I want a Bowie one. I want a Nirvana one. There's so many.
Yeah, there's
and Metallica one would be great as well.
Yeah. Well, then if they're going to make Metallica, then they got to make Guns N' Roses too.
Oh yeah, just all of those bands from like the 80s. They all have such a a lot of the rock bands did a lot of stuff, but especially I feel like a lot of the 80s rock bands, there are a lot of stories to be told there, and a lot, especially since a lot of their stories kind of intertwine.
Yeah.
You can't tell the Metallica story without mentioning
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses and all of that. So
And it's also because another problem with the biopic is the fact that sometimes certain artists are not going to connect with a wide mainstream audience, because I know that for so many years they were trying to make a biopic about Debbie Harry. There was a point in time when Kirsten Dunst was going to play her, but
ooh,
everybody was saying it's not going to make that much money because how many Blondie fans are there out there? That's the problem. So that's why it's really pick and choose, and that's the reason as to why we get ones like Bohemian Rhapsody, because there are so many Queen fans, and we get Rocket Man because there are so many Elton John fans. It's why in 1993 we had The Doors with Val Kilmer, because there were so many Doors fans. But that's why I feel that there has to be other ways. I think that Behind the Music should come back, more Funko Pops should be made. That's where I feel that those kinds of legacies, but also there needs to be more pushing towards these artists, because the closest at this point that we've ever gotten to a Led Zeppelin biopic is Almost Famous. So here's a question that I think you're going to probably take to heart, and I really want to know what your answer is. Do you feel that rock is dead? Are there any artists out there now that are stating the opposite, or is music, at least mainstream music, going to continue going down this current trend that we've had for the last 20 years?
rock is not dead. That is period. I hate when people say that rock is dead, because they're obviously not listening, and they're not listening hard enough. Personally, that's my opinion. If people believe that, because there's just so many artists out there. They're not the mainstream artists. They're not the super big artists, but they're the artists that are doing the work, and they're going to be, I think in due time, they're going to show just how alive rock truly is. And I think that some bands, oh goodness, that are doing the opposite of what mainstream music is doing is they're smaller bands, but bands like Dollskin, bands like The Fame, they're just doing something that's a little bit different, and you see it. Palo Royale, they're doing things that are different and different from mainstream rock that I feel like are going to change some things, or they're bringing back old sounds, which is never a bad thing. And they're changing it and making it their own. And I feel like there's something to be said for that. And I think rock is very much alive.
Yeah, I think that the problem is sometimes when, like you said, certain artists can actually try and bring back old trends. Unfortunately, if you get too much of a good thing, it can burst and blow up in your face. Because I remember in the early 2000s, there was a massive, simple, classic rock sound, and it was in the form of the Strokes, the Vines, the Highs, the White Stripes, Jet, Rooney. You had all of these bands that were really trying to bring back that. Even Weezer, making their big comeback back in 2001, was really trying to capture that classic early 60s rock sound. And it was there for a while, and then it just collapsed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2004, especially during the peak of Coldplay, that was when this neo new wave trend started coming. So you had bands like Franz Ferdinand and Modest Mouse, and one of my personal favorite bands, The Killers, and another one of my favorite bands, which is practically classic rock in a box right now, and that's The Darkness. I love The Darkness. But it's like they tried, and then they just vanished, and now the new wave sound is coming back, and the headliners are the 1975, Churches, even Paramore is starting to sound like neo new wave now.
But one that I know that is along, maybe not sounding, but sounding like the classic rock is Greta Van Fleet. I went and saw them in concert a couple of months ago, and it was funny because there was people my age, and then there was like people that were like my grandparents' age, because they have such a older sound, but the only problem I feel like with bands like that is they have to make sure that they're putting their own spin on it and making it their own and not just trying to copy it. That's my only that's the problem I have with Greta Van Fleet. The more that I listen to them, is like I feel like they're not making it original enough.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why the 1975 is as popular as they are, and that they really do stick out amongst all the other popular music that's out there right now, because they are trying to do different things with their music. I mean, I loved that when their third album came out, because their sophomore album is probably one of the most popular albums of the last 5 years. And then when they made their newest album, which came out last year, people were so angry because it doesn't sound like the last album. But I'm like, give me a break. Oh, and by the way, the other new wave band, even though even they're kind of like gone, that's Walk the Moon. They had that big single, Shut Up and Dance, and everybody loved it. And I bought the album. It was really great. I bought the following album, and I liked that too. But where the hell are they? Like,
Oh yeah, I have a story about Walk the Moon. They actually came in. I go to college at Itzy State, and they actually were our LDOC last day of class like performers. So they actually came, and it's funny you mentioned that. It's like, where are they? It's like, well, they were on campus painting in our free expression tunnel, and just no one knew who they were. They were just passing by. No one knew that it was Walk the Moon. And so I just found that really, really funny that you mentioned that, because it was almost like no one recognized them. No one knew who they were. And most people only went for Shut Up and Dance because that's all they knew.
yeah, it's a pity because I've listened to both of the albums that I own, and I love their albums. And also, I'm glad you also mentioned people that they make their album and they also try to even give in to the mainstream, if you will. And I think that that is one of the worst things, because one of the most amazing bands that came out in the early 2000s, they're unrecognizable to me right now, because they literally just decided to go with the mainstream popular sound, and that's Maroon 5.
Yeah.
When you listen to their last album and you compare that to Songs About Jane, who are they?
Yeah, it's a hard line to walk with bands that are like trying to evolve their sound and then totally change what they were in the beginning. It's like you want to evolve and not put out the same like 5 albums that all sound the same, but also want to stick to your principles and have some semblance of like maintaining what you were.
Yeah, because I have the first 5 Maroon 5 albums. I will, ironically, the first 5. I will never buy the sixth one, because the sixth one just doesn't sound like Maroon 5 to me. I mean, their first 3 albums are amazing, and they're very different from each other. When you get to Overexposed and 5, they just get ultra poppy. And their sixth album, this shows you that I don't even care about them anymore, because I don't even know the name of their sixth album, but it sounds like an R&B group. And they have all of these hip hop artists as part of their sound right now. I mean, that big song that they had last year, Girls Like You, it's funny because everybody loves that song because the video is so powerful. And yes, the music video sends a very, very powerful and important message about women in the world right now. But to me, that doesn't make the song great.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. Not a big fan of as of more of Maroon 5's more recent stuff.
I really believed that in the mid 2000s, we were going to see a change in the trends. I really thought that we were going to get more of the Michelle Branches of the world, or the Vanessa Carltons of the world, or more Panic at the Discos, and we didn't. Now we have more DJ Khaled's and more Ariana Grande's, and we have all of this music that I personally feel is fake, because I just don't feel that these people are giving me their raw talent. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm waiting for Adele to make a new album at this point in time, because she pretty much will be the only breath of fresh air that I'll ever get in the mainstream at this point. And I personally feel that it's sad that all of these people like you and me and so many other people that I know that listen to all of this music that is so diverse and so different, that people just want this simple, technology driven sound at this point in time, and that is our mainstream music. And I feel that that's one of the main reasons why radio stations are dying, and the ways that music used to be are dying.
For me, it's like I'm kind of okay with what I listen to not being the mainstream. It's
Yeah,
like
me too.
it's like I'm fine with that, and I feel like when bands go more mainstream or become more mainstream, that's when you see some of the changes. Like with Maroon 5, it's like they got really big and now they're not the same. Even like Panic at the Disco, it's like they got so big and now the new music is good, don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's just not the same. So I feel like there's something to be said with it not being so mainstream.
Yeah, and I think we also need more artists like what Kurt Cobain was, because he hated the fact that his sound became mainstream. He never wanted to be mainstream. But you want to know what the truth is? If he was still alive today, I seriously feel that music would still be where it was then, a little bit more than it is now. I feel that we would have had so many more artists out there that were more inspired by him, and more artists that wanted to play music that was on the vein of the grunge sound, because I really feel that that kind of music, that grunge slash 90s alternative, it never gets old.
Oh
Not
no.
even, are you kidding me? People still rock the flannel. People still like wearing the flannel and the t-shirt and the ripped jeans. That's still very relevant.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm that person. That's
So the last question that I want to ask you is something that I think you're excited for, and I think you've been waiting for it. Let's talk about your favorite band that you just love to promote to everybody out there. And I know exactly who they are, and quite frankly, I do not blame you, because I'm right there with you.
The Foo Fighters are my all-time favorite band. They're the best. They never get old. I've seen them in concert now 3 times. Their live performance is amazing. I just almost have no words for the level at which their music is just amazing, and then just how they've changed me as a person and just everything about them. They're just so talented, and they've had their evolution over the years and changed their sound, and in not huge ways, but it's every album their albums are distinct. Every album sounds a little bit different, and then they try and play around with new things, like their Sonic Highways album, which is basically a concept album, and there's just so much to be said and so much to love about them.
Yeah, I think the greatest thing about the Foo Fighters is it's a true success story of a person who literally came off of one of the biggest of rock limelights in Nirvana to create something truly new, to preserve what true rock and roll is. Because you're absolutely right. Dave Grohl is the hardest working man in music right now, I think, even though I haven't heard much about him in recent years. But every time the Foo Fighters release an album, I get excited. Now, I won't lie, I didn't really care much for the last album. I don't know what it was, but I didn't think it was one of their best. But their whole discography is beautiful. Sonic Highways, to me, is one of the best albums that they have. I mean, I know that when it comes to their best album, you go right to Color and Shape, without a doubt. But Sonic Highways, I just love the concept, and I loved all of the things that were put into that album to make it happen. The fact that they went all around the United States, and that they collabed with so many different specific artists, how they wanted to make sure that they went to specific recording studios and gain inspiration. I mean, that's what making great music is all about.
Oh yeah, and then the fact, just everything that they've done recently, like their album is 2011, Wasting Light was all done at Dave's house. They built it and they did it on tape. They didn't.
On analog, yes, all on analog.
They did it old school and
Mhm.
didn't use all of the digital stuff that is common nowadays. They didn't use any of that, and there's just something to be said for the fact that their first album was everything that was on that album was entirely Dave Grohl, and then he did the lyrics, he played all of the instruments, he sang all the songs, and then it became popular and he was like, okay, now I have to tour with it and I have no band. And then how they were able to keep that sound and maintain it, and it's just amazing.
And you also have to give the Foo Fighters so much prop because of the fact that he still manages to keep his core guys with him. And you also have to give David Grohl even more respects to find a drummer that is not just as good, possibly even better than him, and Taylor Hawkins. I love him.
Taylor Hawkins is amazing. He's an amazing drummer, and he's also an amazing singer. Now, if you go and see them live now, you will see Dave get behind the drum set, and Taylor comes out and sings. Like when I saw them 2 months ago, they did Under Pressure, and Dave was on the drums, and Taylor was out singing, and it was just an amazing experience. And he's just a super talented drummer, and it's got to be so intimidating to be the drummer in a band with one of the greatest drummers ever in Dave Grohl.
I agree, and I want to make sure that I get to see Foo Fighters in concert before their time is officially gone, because as of now, I can name bands like Rush and REM. These are bands that I will never get to see in concert anymore because they're officially retired. I mean, I was fortunate to see The Who in concert, which was amazing, and I've seen Aerosmith 3 times, merely because of the fact that the first time I went to go see them, Fuel was the opening act, and then I was going because I just wanted to see the opening act. So I saw Aerosmith and Fuel, then I saw Aerosmith and Lenny Kravitz, and then I saw Aerosmith and Motley Crue. And seeing Motley Crue live was one of the greatest experiences that I had. But I will say, if you want to see an amazing concert, go see anything that's from the 80s New Wave. My 2 greatest concerts that I've ever been to, because I told you, I've seen Iron Maiden, I've seen Dream Theater, but the 2 best concerts I ever went to were The Cure and Depeche Mode.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's something to be said about a really amazing stage presence. I don't know if you've ever seen Alice Cooper live.
Oh, no, I haven't, but I know he's a stage. I've seen him.
Oh my goodness. I've seen him 2 or 3 times, and every time it's just an amazing experience. The live snakes, the faux decapitations, and just everything is just amazing.
Yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to a band that I always promote, I've already said this earlier, it's definitely Dream Theater, because I just want people. You don't even need to be a rock fan. I just want you to hear something that is just unlike anything you have ever heard before. I mean, these guys, it's really interesting when you actually tell people about a rock band and you say to them that these guys are classically trained. It's like, to an average person who doesn't appreciate music outside of things like what we talked about, they don't grasp that concept. Like, these guys went to the music school of Berkeley, Boston. They have James LaBrie, who used to sing opera. So the fact that they have an opera singer that now sings progressive heavy metal, that's just like insane. And all the concepts and the songwriting and the styles that they use in their albums, they're not perfect. There have been some misses, but I will definitely say that Distance Over Time, which just came out earlier this year, was definitely one of their better albums that they have made in recent years. And it's good because of the fact that a lot of people have been waiting to see them get back to that truly great sound that they gave us in the late 90s, early 2000s. But yeah, I promote them just because of the fact that you will never hear them on the radio. You will never hear the average music fan or person just talk about it. And you just need to hear something new and exciting and I just feel that a band like that will just open up your mind and just make you hear something that you've never heard before.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it, everybody. I think we may have even gone over the hour, but there's nothing wrong with that. But Brooke, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure chatting with you about music, and I'm looking forward to having everybody else hear what you had to say when this video officially goes up on my channel tomorrow morning, Monday, the 15th of July at 7 a.m. So everybody, thank you very much for another Sunday Sit Down. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time when we discuss another great topic, but more importantly, another great YouTuber to discuss it with. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.